Most people think Sleeping Beauty ends with a kiss. But one of the most famous versions has a secret second act where the princess survives the curse, only to meet a brand new villain who wants to eat her children. Wait, not metaphorically. Not like she's emotionally toxic. I mean, the story literally goes there. So if you grew up on Disney, where it's all soft lightning, pretty music and a dramatic cape moment, I need you to picture this instead. A sleeping kingdom, a princess frozen in time, a prince who thinks the danger is over, and then the mother-in-law shows up like, "Cute family, I'm hungry." No, because what? Today we are unpacking the real origins of Sleeping Beauty, where the story comes from, why it got darker before it got softer, and why people still cannot stop retelling it. Imagine a castle at night. Candles melting down the sides of gold holders, a baby's first celebration, music in the halls, and one person at the door who was not invited. And that is where everything starts. But before we jump in, quick context, because this is where people get confused. Disney's Sleeping Beauty was inspired mainly by the French literary version by Charles Perrault from 1697 and also by the Brothers Grimm version published in 1812. And there's an even older Italian version by Giambattista Basile from the 1600s called Sun, Moon and Thalia. That is a lot. We will get there. There are even earlier influences and similar stories too, but these three are the big pillars people talk about. So let's do this like a story. Who, where, when, and then we spiral, because it does spiral. Ready? Okay, so Act 1, the party. In most versions, a king and queen want a child for a long time. When the baby is finally born, they throw a celebration. Think royal glitter, endless food, everyone pretending they are best friends. And they invite the important magical beings, fairies, wise women, whatever that version calls them. But there's a problem. Someone gets left out. Because sometimes it's because they literally forgot her. Sometimes it's because they thought she was gone or doesn't come out anymore. Sometimes it's because they only had a certain number of fancy plate settings and they didn't want to insult anyone by giving them a cheaper plate. Which, I hate that this makes sense, because this is the most human fairy tale reason ever. We didn't invite you because we didn't have enough matching dishes. That's not even evil, that's just petty administration. But the uninvited fairy does not take it as a dish problem. She takes it as a respect problem. So she shows up anyway, and the room goes cold. And everyone's smiling, but the smiling is the fake kind that makes your cheeks hurt. And she gives her a gift. In Perrault's version, she curses the princess to prick her finger on a spindle and die. Then another fairy softens it, so instead of dying, she will sleep for 100 years and wake up again. In the Grimm version, it's similar. The curse becomes a 100-year sleep. Disney turns it into the iconic true love kiss thing and makes it feel romantic and heroic. But in all those stories, it's more like a timer, not a cure. More like fate with an appointment. And now the parents panic. They do the classic fairy tale parent move. They try to delete the problem from the universe. They ban spindles. They burn spinning wheels. They outlaw the very object that will harm her. Which, I get it. If someone told you your kid is going to get hurt by this one specific object, you'd be like, cool, we are never owning that object again. But here's the thing. You can't outlaw curiosity. You can't outlaw fate. And you definitely can't outlaw one random old lady who is still spinning in a dusty tower somewhere like, what? I don't read royal memos. The curse does not wait politely. It waits like it has all the time in the world. And then one day it hits. And it hits in the most unfair way. So let's go there. Act 2. The tower, the spindle, the moment. Years pass. The princess grows up. In some versions she's 15, in some she's older, but she reaches the age where the curse is ready. And one day the king and queen are away, and she has freedom. Not the big freedom, but the little kind that feels huge when you've been protected your whole life. So she wanders, and she explores, and she finds a part of the castle she's never seen before. A tucked-away stairway, a narrow passage, a door that feels like it shouldn't be there. You know that feeling where you find a hidden hallway in a building and your brain goes, "That is either treasure or a horror movie?" That. She goes up, step after step. The air gets cooler, the light changes, and at the top she finds an old woman spinning, the spindle turning, thread whispering through fingers. It's weirdly calm, it's almost cozy. And the princess is fascinated because she has never seen this forbidden object in her life. So she asks questions. And the old woman, in most tellings, isn't even trying to hurt her. That's what makes it creepier, honestly. It's like the curse is bigger than anyone's intentions. So the princess reaches out. She touches it. And she pricks her finger. And that's it. She collapses. And the story goes quiet. In Perrault's version, a good fairy shows up and puts everyone in the castle to sleep too, so the princess won't wake up alone. Even the animals, depending on the telling. The whole place becomes frozen in a moment. In Grimm, the whole castle falls asleep as well, and a hedge of thorns grows around the castle. And that hedge is important, because in Disney, the villain makes the thorns to keep the prince out. But in some older versions, the barrier exists as protection, which is such a wild flip. It's like the thing that looks dangerous is actually the safety system. Like those spiky anti-pigeon spikes on buildings. Ugly, threatening, but technically there to protect the space. And now the castle becomes a time capsule, a museum of the moment. A princess asleep, a kingdom asleep. 100 years pass, and outside, seasons keep moving. Rain, sun, leaves collecting in the corners, birds nesting in places birds should not be nesting. And the whole time, the story is waiting for one person to arrive at exactly the right moment. So, who arrives? And what happens when they do? Because this is where the story splits depending on the version. And it gets messy. Act 3. The Prince, the Awakening. The part everyone thinks they know. After 100 years, a prince comes along. In some versions, he hears legends. In some versions, he's hunting and stumbles on the place. In some versions, the thorns literally part for him, like the story itself is letting him in. And that part always makes me laugh in the most stressed way, because imagine being Prince number 12 who tried earlier. You fought the thorns, you lost, and then some guy shows up later and the thorns are like, "Oh hi bestie!" Like okay, sure, I guess fate has favorites. The prince enters the castle and it's eerie. Everyone's frozen mid-life. A servant holding a tray, a dog asleep by the fireplace, a candle that should have burned out a century ago but somehow did not. He finds the princess, and in many modern retellings, he kisses her, and that breaks the spell. In Perrault's version, it's less of a kiss moment and more like the time is up and she wakes when he arrives. They talk. They connect. The castle wakes. And I want to say something important here because people always debate this part. Some people view this kiss trope as a romantic destiny. Others see it as an uncomfortable because she cannot consent while asleep. Both reactions make sense. Fairy tales weren't written with modern consent language, but we live in the modern world, so it's normal that the scene lands differently now. And we can hold both truths at once. We can say this was the romantic symbol for waking life in spring, and also say, yeah, it's complicated. Okay, so the princess wakes, the kingdom wakes, the music comes back, and if you've only seen Disney, you think, great, they win the end. But Perrault was like, actually, no, Because the real villain might not be the fairy. It might be the prince's mother. And this is the part people do not expect. So let's talk about the forgotten ending. Act 4. The marriage that stays secret. The mother who is not normal. In Perrault's story, the prince and princess get married, but he keeps it quiet. And not because he is ashamed of her, not because she did anything wrong. He keeps it quiet because of his mother. And Perrault describes the prince's mother as an ogress, basically a monster-like being with a taste for human flesh. And yes, it's written like she's reformed, like she doesn't eat people anymore. But she has cravings, and children in that story logic are the delicacy. So now you have a fairy tale that becomes a family horror story. Like forget dragons, forget curses. It's Thanksgiving dinner with the world's worst mother-in-law. Years go by. The prince visits his wife secretly. They have children. In Perrault's version, the kids have names like Dawn and Day. Cute, right? Sweet. Like the story is trying to soothe you. And then the prince becomes king. He finally brings his wife and kids home. And then he has to leave because war, duty, whatever the story needs. And he leaves his mother in charge. This is like leaving your house keys with someone you know hates you. So the moment he's gone, the ogress queen mother makes her move. She orders the cook to bring the first child, to prepare a meal. And the cook, who is the real hero of this story, refuses to harm them. He hides the child. He cooks something else. In some versions, it's lamb or a deer. He lies to the queen, and he keeps doing it. Second child, same trick. Then the queen demands the mother, the princess, and the cook hides her too and serves another substitute. And I know this sounds like a strange kitchen comedy, but the stakes are horrifying, because if the cook slips up once, that whole family is gone. And the queen starts to suspect. So she plans a final scene, a trap. In Perrault's story, she prepares a tub filled with vipers and other dangerous creatures. And she plans to throw the princess and the children into it. Imagine the courtyard, cold stone, a crowd that's not cheering, a giant container that should not exist in a normal castle. The queen standing there like she's been waiting for this moment her entire life. And the princess, who already survived a century of sleep, realizing her happily ever after is still being hunted. And then the king returns unexpectedly. He walks in and sees the setup. And now it's not a fairy tale curse. It's family betrayal. And he exposes his mother. In Perrault's version, the ogress queen mother throws herself into the tub in rage and dies. In other tellings, she is punished directly. Either way, the princess survives, the children survive, and they finally get the ending we thought they had earlier. But notice what the story just did. It said the danger wasn't only out in the forest. The danger was inside the family. And that is why this forgotten ending hit so hard, because it turns a romance into a gothic thriller. And we are still not done, because there's an even older version, and it's darker, and I have to talk about it carefully. Act 5. The version Disney will never touch. Basile's Sun, Moon and Talia. Okay, so Giambattista Basile wrote a version in the 1800s called Sun, Moon and Talia. And this is where I need to be very clear. This version includes sexual assault. And I'm not going to describe it graphically, but I'm going to say what the plot is because it matters historically. In Basile's story, the sleeping princess is Talia. She falls into an enchanted sleep after a piece of flax ends up in her finger. Her father believes she's basically gone, and he leaves her in a secluded place. Time passes. A king comes by, finds her asleep, and assaults her while she is unconscious. That is what the text implies, and it is not romantic, it is violence. Later, she gives birth while still unconscious. One of the babies removes the flax from her finger, and that wakes her. So she wakes up into a life she did not choose. And the king returns. And here's where the story becomes even more complicated, because that king is married. His queen finds out, and she becomes the next villain, and she tries to kill the children and the mother. There's deception in the kitchen, again, a cook who saves the kids, and a final punishment scene. And Basile ends with the king marrying Talia, which from a modern point of view is horrifying. But we need to understand why these stories looked like this back then. Some people interpret Basile's version as a reflection of real historical power dynamics, a warning about how powerless women could be in certain systems, not an endorsement, not a romance, a mirror. Other people see it as the grim reality of old storytelling, where women's suffering was normalized in ways we now reject. And both of those readings are valid. What matters is we do not pretend it's a love story. It's not. It's a dark artifact of its time. And that's exactly why later writers changed things. Perrault softens it. Grimm softens it more. Disney turns it into a clean moral universe where love is the solution. Because cultures evolve, and stories evolve with them. But the bones of the story stay the same. A girl is cursed, she is frozen in time, someone comes to claim her life at the end of the spell. And then there's always a question underneath it all. Was she ever allowed to choose? Which brings me to the part I almost forgot. Actually, wait, I didn't forget, I just park it in my brain for later. Remember the spindle? The spinning, the thread? I promised we'd come back to why that object shows up so often. Here's the thing. Spinning wasn't random. For centuries, spinning and weaving were tied to fate, to women's work, to the idea that your life is a thread being pulled through time. So a spindle curse is like saying, your destiny is going to cut you. It's symbolic, but it's also practical. A spindle was a normal tool, not a dragon's tooth. So the fear is, your doom isn't going to arrive as something obvious and dramatic. It's going to arrive as something ordinary, something you didn't think could destroy you. And I hate that this makes sense, because it's the scariest kind of prophecy, the everyday kind. Every time I read these stories where parents ban an object, I think of those people who child-proof their homes so aggressively that the kid grows up and can't open a normal cabinet without a crisis. Like the cabinet has a tiny plastic lock, the kid is 17 and we are all standing there like, we've created a creature who cannot survive IKEA. That's basically Sleeping Beauty's parents. They try to remove danger instead of teaching the skill. And then the danger shows up anyway, in the one place they didn't check. Okay, back to the point. What does this story mean and why does it keep coming back? Because if we ignore the darkest versions, the core themes are still unsettling. A young woman's body becomes a battleground for someone else's resentment. A whole kingdom freezes because one person cannot escape fate. A barrier grows, either to protect her or to trap her, depending on the telling. A prince arrives and the story frames him as destiny. And then in the Perrault's version, the princess survives the curse, only to face the kind of danger that feels the most real. Not magic, not fairy, a family member with power. A system that can hurt you inside the walls that should keep you safe. That's why it's gothic, that's why it's haunting. And that's why it's still endlessly retold. Now, if you are thinking, okay, but what's the moral? Fair, let's land it. One interpretation is about overprotection. You cannot remove every risk from a life. If you try, the risk will return as something small and stupid and random. Another interpretation is about time. 100 years passing while someone stays the same is terrifying. It's like being out of sync with the world, like waking up and everyone you knew is gone. Disney avoids that emotional horror by making the whole kingdom sleep too, which is actually kind. And then there's the most uncomfortable interpretation, that many versions reflect power and control over women's lives, silencing, possession. A girl preserved as an object of beauty. That's the shadow side. And the modern retellings try to reclaim it by giving her more agency, more voice, more choice. Because we want her to be a person, not a statue. So, here's my question for you. Which version scares you more? The curse that hits no matter what you do? Or the happily ever after that turns into a mother-in-law horror story? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And tell me what fairy tale you want me to cover next. Like the video if you want more of these stories, subscribe if you are staying for spooky stories and beyond, and share this with that one friend who still thinks Sleeping Beauty is just a cute dress and a kiss. Because now you know, the kiss is not even the most shocking part. The most shocking part is what the story hides after the curtain falls. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.